Good morning. Would like to call the Executive Committee, October 28th, to order. Can I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Lear?
Present.
Mr. Hess?
Present.
Mr. Tholen? Mr. Byrne?
Present.
Ms. Weber?
Present.
Mr. Payton? Mr. Payton? Mr. Kinzinger?
Present.
Ms. Haas?
Present.
Mr. Featherling?
Present.
Mr. Miller?
Present.
Mr. Hunter? Mr. Seroy?
Present.
Mr. Wheeler?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Nothing, had no public comment today. Approval of the minutes. Motion to, looks like we have, I'd like to get a motion to combine the minutes and the VAC report so we don't have to do separate roll calls. Can I get a motion for that? We'll go with Mr. Hess and Mr. Hunter. Let's do roll call on Zoom, please.
Ms. Weber?
Present. Yes, aye.
Mr. Payton? Ms. Haas?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Payton?
We
Oh,
lost
he
him.
left.
He was on here, Kelly.
All those in the room, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under legislative, Steve, you didn't have anything today. I had just a couple of things to mention. You may remember that we joined the Illinois State Association of Counties for the rest of this budget year. They were kind of letting us dip our toe in the water, get the information. We have 2 board seats to fill this upcoming year, and plus a separate legislative committee seat to fill on that association. Now, those are mostly made up of the large metro and collar counties, if you will, the outer ring outside of that, but then there's a few downstate counties as well. I also just got through negotiating, instead of $4,900 down to $3,000 for the next year. We included it in the budget, so you will have to make a decision, the board will, in December to proceed on that. And you know, the budgetary has already been accounted for, but again, that was one of the things that a new board has to decide as far as, and then there'll be, you know, appointments to those types of positions as well. So kind of keep that in mind if you're so interested in some of those, and then let the administration know. And that can be at the end of November, beginning of December. So we'll talk more about that later. The other thing was the Kankakee River Basin and Yellow River Basin Development Commission. That's the river commission, if you will, in Indiana, that I sit on the board of as one of the 2 Illinois representatives. That was something that had never existed before, where the 2 states are working together. I at least wanted to give an update that they're awarding bids for kind of structure work that they're doing on the Yellow River, where it meets into the Kankakee. That's a major source of sand from the Yellow River, and so they're starting some of that the mitigation efforts over there. It's a combination of a new engineering firm along with Christopher Burke, who's been there. They're in a supportive role now. Christopher Burke is they have the history, the studies, everything that's going on. There is a extensive work plan for the Indiana side of the river, and also recommendations for the Illinois side. So that commission, if you will, has been kind of, because of COVID, resources were very thin. So this next year is when their tax levy starts. They'll start having, you know, income coming into that commission. They're going to start executing on their work plan. They've also got 2 side-by-side large farms that are just on the west side, if you will, about maybe 3 miles down the road in maybe about 5 or 6 miles down the road in Indiana from 41, and it's the Thayer Farm, and I believe, well, I'm brain cramping on the name. It's like the Blackberry Farm right next door. Each of them are over 200 acres. Doesn't seem like a lot. It's massive, and those are dedicated towards a flexible floodplain, if you will, where they'll open up the gates and let, during high water events, the water will flood up to 5 feet deep on those sides. So they're investing in retention, because they know it's not just about how much water to get to the river, it's where you can let it be a river and flood, so it doesn't flood around infrastructure within towns. So there's a lot more of that's needed. I think we need to look at it here. But I want to give you an update on what we're working on over there, because at some point, someone's going to have to join me from the board to start get up to speed on these things. So we'll look for someone who plans on being involved with the river, or currently a sportsman who enjoys fishing, has time on the river, maybe has some history. Those decisions, I would like to start bringing somebody with me as we start going forward, so there can be either proxies or someone who might take over and run with it when my term on that organization expires, or after that, whatever we decide is appropriate. So I just want to mention that to the executive committee. While the appointment comes to the individual, not the position I take right now, it should always be somebody that's on the board here. So, Mr. Hunter, do you have a question?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted you to update us on the machinery, that dredging machine that Senator Joyce had been discussing in terms of extrapolating all the sand and then maybe using the sand for commercial use.
Sure. The monies that Senator Joyce got, okay, I want to say it was $7 million in one get, if you will. Well, no, it was 6, but then it was another $1 million that was just for the county board to do flood mitigation and river initiatives here. So there's $1 million for us, if you will, the county board, and that's appropriated through the capital bill. And then there was another 6, correct. It was a 7 total. And that was the discussion that the senator had. Maybe it was a dredge, maybe it was a dredge and a combination of other things. Problem in one of the issues is if you spend all your money on equipment, then you don't have any money to run it. And you still don't have a place to put the sand, because that's a major problem, and it's the kind of sand that is not saleable. There is no commercial use for it beyond tilling it into farmland to actually make it more drainable, which is actually a decent use. I mean, out especially in the western part of the county, the soils are almost too rich. So you have some issues out there, but there really isn't a value to the sand per se. There's just, man, I think if you lined up rail cars with how much sand we'd have to get out of the river, it would stretch from here to Kansas City, Missouri. That's how long that train would be. That's how much sand is in the river. And those are studies that happened long ago with J.R. Black and others. So I have brought Senator Joyce over there to meet that river commission. The head of the Indiana Department of Natural Resources was on this trip. We went to State Line Bridge and a couple of those flexible flooding zones, if you will, that I mentioned. So we're just starting to get him aware of what they're doing, because it's not all about getting the sand out, because guess what happens? You get the sand out and it fills right back in until you stop it in Indiana. That's what they're working on. So while the senator's idea is a good one, it may be a little premature to invest in equipment. Maybe that money's better used for matching grants to help temporarily move things out of the way. Roma Park, mouth of the Iroquois, things like that. To be determined, I guess, is the long answer to your short question. But there's a lot of conversations going, and that'll ramp up in the next year. Good problems to have, because usually you're talking about how do we get money. Now it's like, okay, where's the money best utilized in the short and long term? So couldn't say we have a better friend than Pat Joyce as far as the river goes right now. That's for sure in Springfield. Senator Parkhurst has been very, yeah. Well, and Senator Parker, Representative Parkhurst, that situation in Roma Park is untenable. The sand has choked out the entry point for the rescue boat. So you can't even get the boat on the river the rescue boat in the boating part of the river. That's a real problem. The sand is just completely choked out. So they got to come all the way down to Kankakee to put their rescue boat in to go right back up, 250 yards out. Yeah, 6 miles. It's a real problem. And that's the township fire department who's dealing with that. And to me, that's a life safety issue. So maybe that's part of where that could go. I would think that our $1 million, maybe $100,000 of it would be matching money with the DCEO. Maybe, somebody, the Army Corps, everybody gets together, and that's where Representative Parkhurst has already started that conversation. So, yep. So that's all I had. Now, Ben had something. I apologize. I left the presentation off of here. Not because I don't value it. It's just because I forgot. So Ben had something he wanted to tell you. It's what we're working on. It has to do with a grant. It will come back at some point, but it's between a lot of different agencies within Kankakee County, and it's around, I don't want to say H1N1 because that's a virus. It's a workforce thing, but what H1B? You ever heard of H1B visas? You know, it's these high-tech jobs that we're bringing people in from overseas because we're not filling them here. There's a grant to develop our own workforce to take care of those jobs, which we have those here in Kankakee County that we're having trouble filling. So go ahead, Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, thank you for having me today. I kind of drilled this as FOA. It's about 80 pages down into 8 slides, trying to kind of give everybody a little feel for exactly what we're talking about here. And this is, it's tapping new IT talent, it's advanced manufacturing for the workforce, and it's building a transportation workforce. This is H-1B efforts surrounded, it's a $40 million allotment from the U.S. Department of Labor, and the goal is to upskill talent, and kind of as we work through this, the overall effort is to focus in certain segments and upskill our existing underskilled and middle skilled talent force. We can go on the next one. So floor on it's about $500,000 or $500,000, $500,000 to up to 10, 25% match. There's one piece of this in the grant announcement. It specifically states that no cash match is obligated on behalf of the applicant, which is good, but a 25% match is required. That's in the next paragraph. So it's a little contradictory, but the idea that this is about a partnership with the workforce board, the community college, the high school, Olivet Nazarene University, the county, obviously, and our employers. If we don't have anywhere to place individuals that are getting upskilled, if we don't have an existing workforce to upskill, it just doesn't really make sense. Our employers are coming to Tim and I when we go out and do our retention visits and saying we're having trouble, filling roles in these, certain jobs. We really need, talent pool. We talk with the community college, we talk with the university. Here's all the things we need. So we got an opportunity for over a 4-year grant period to look at existing employees, and actually if you slide into probably the next one, you have to be 17 years old, you have to be currently unemployed, underemployed, or incumbent. And I think really the incumbent one is the one that I really want to touch on here. Everybody knows what unemployed and underemployed is, but when we talk about the incumbent workforce, we're talking about individuals who have jobs at existing locations, for whatever reason aren't capable because their family situation doesn't allow it, their time doesn't allow it, they haven't been able to get that additional certification, that advanced degree to move up within the company. So they're kind of stuck within their organization. They might be working at a fantastic company, they just haven't been able to advance themselves. It could be the fact that they don't have childcare for evening classes. It could be they don't know how exactly. You could be 40 years old and just not want to go back to school. There's a multitude of barriers as to why people don't advance themselves. And this program, in bringing in the incumbent workforce component, allows us to look at somebody who's not necessarily unemployed, but just is in a job that would be their end job. They wouldn't be able to move within the company, and we could potentially give them certificate training or advanced degrees, which would allow them to move up. So it really opens that pool when we talk about affecting individuals who could be employable within Kankakee County, because ideally a company that's telling us, hey, we really need advanced IT or advanced manufacturing, if they've got somebody within their existing workforce that they could just upskill a little bit, they'd be happy to do that. But sending them off to training and costing out that training on the front end is difficult for that company. That would be where this program would come in, and we would be able to utilize those funds to either do on-the-job training or specific classroom work or a combination of the two. This one gets a little bit much, and I apologize for that. But there are program parameters that we have to hit. In looking at the program parameters, I think they all make perfect sense to us. And if this hasn't gone to you, it will. If you want to read all of these, but the idea that we're creating an ecosystem for these job industries. We're advancing these specific job industries with this. So we're offering high quality training options. We're offering specific employment opportunities. We're leveraging existing partnerships. And we're doing all the things you would need to do to make an effective grant program, and that's what they've really outlined for us to do. Again, I touched on the sectors, specifically the three main sectors, and then the target, which is nice for us, is they're either H-1B industries or occupations within those. So we would specifically focus on OJT and career path training for specific industries, and we're working on that kind of partner list right now, because when the application goes in, we're going to identify specific partners, and we'll get letters of support from companies that would say, if this gets off the ground, we'd be happy to take up some of these employees and get them into the training programs, or we would be happy to put together a list of our employees who are interested in moving forward in this opportunity. So we have kind of three tranches of which we can jump into, and I'm only going to talk about the last one in this slide, really because it's only 10% of the grant, but I think that this is sometimes the barrier. Can you get to work? Can you get back and forth to work? Can you get childcare? Can you get specific things you need? And 10% of our grant could be utilized to make sure that if there is a child care need, if there is a transportation need of an individual, because we're talking about individuals that are from the age of 17 up that aren't currently enrolled in in high school, you would have an opportunity to get to and from work potentially. You would have an opportunity to have this training and work combo supported by this grant, because the employers, bless them, aren't taking on childcare specifically. I mean, it's a very kind of an odd thing for an employer to get in the middle of, and so there are these types of barriers that we can utilize this grant for, career path advancement, training, the college, the university, LaDonna over at the Workforce Board, they know all about those things. But I think that this is an interesting opportunity for us to be able to use that kind of additional support component to make this program work a little better. So again, we're going to focus on existing employees through OJT and upskilling. We'll try and obviously find new employees and leverage the existing programs. We've had discussions with Olivet Nazarene University. We've had discussions with KCC. We've had discussions with the workforce. We've had discussions with Kankakee High School, district, and this idea that there are partners that offer existing training programs. They're currently underfunded, or they could always use more, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel on this one. We have the partners. The county would not be responsible for hiring new trainers. We would not be responsible for picking up this program. We would not have to manage this in-house. Our responsibility, very similar to how we manage the workforce, would be as a fiscal agent. So we would be the lead grantee as the agent surrounding the workforce now, apply for the grant, manage the funds, utilize the finance department, and frankly all of their accolades that they're receiving to really offer a streamlined, clean grant, and then be able to contact the work out with the college or the university. I've had conversations with Olivet about which one of their programs might fit in. They have a cybersecurity program that could potentially turn immediately into a certificate program. They're very interested in that. Obviously, advanced manufacturing has been something heavily touted by the KCC, but they've also got apprenticeship programs, skills training, things along those lines that we could roll into either the North Campus or the main campus, where we would be the grantee, and under our umbrella, we would allow these entities to do all the good work that needs to be done.
So just as an explanation, I get these opportunities, a lot of these grant opportunities, from multiple sources, and I think Mr. Hunter asked this question yesterday. I don't know if it was during the meeting or after, but so what I did is I sent an email to just the people he mentioned, the high school, the Olivet, KCC, Workforce Board, and said, hey, this sounds like something we could all do together. And that's my role, not because we're not doing the job training. That's the Workforce Board's job, or what KCC, it's my job to be a cohesive factor. So this is what he does with a lot of his time is put together the dream team, execute the grant application, and then walk it through the process, sometimes even walking it down to Springfield when that walk is necessary. So Mr. Kinzinger.
I noticed you have the term in there, potential and existing employees. Is that limited to residents of Kankakee County, or can you be in Will County and work in Kankakee County?
It's not specifically limited under the grant parameters. We could obviously give some form of preference, but I think it would be difficult for us to say, here's a,
Yeah, I don't
you
want
know,
to limit it.
it's similar to employment. You can't draw a line and say you have to be in a certain location in order to do that. So I think that we could focus that with using, but I mean, Olivet's it's a national and international university,
what
right?
I
I mean, the
was
students could be learning things from anywhere in the world at Olivet. KCC boundary does focus. I mean, they focus specifically within their boundary. They're not allowed to recruit outside of that boundary, but if a student were to decide to come to KCC from outside of their community college district, that is allowable. But I think that we would focus on that. Probably Kankakee County Community College boundary would probably be our best, simplified, oversimplified boundary to utilize. But I think that would be what we would utilize.
We'll go with Mr. Lear first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned discussion with District 111. From what the chairman said, I assume that there's also been communication with the other high schools in the district. I'm thinking particularly BBCHS.
So really the kind of the dialogue on our end, it was, as we kind of postulated the project, is really focusing on because they have to, the eligible applicants have to be north of 17, and typically we're talking about upskilling existing employees. The main partnership will be with KCC and Olivet Nazarene University. We can, as we kind of flush this out, pick up additional partners, but as we conceive this, it was just a quick email out to Dr. Walters and then the remainder of the group. So we're not limiting that, but just as we kind of thought about it on the front end, that was who we shot for.
And so the reason I included Dr. Walters is we have an existing relationship, but just to kind of get the litmus test, is this of value to those seniors that are 17 and they may already be working part-time in some of these facilities or want to get in there part-time, and so while they're going their 2 years of maybe KCC and the other 2 at Olivet, this program would hopefully partner with them along the way to support that. So they're not excluded. It was just on the litmus test side of it, is this even a value? That's where I reached out. So, and yes, Mr. Hunter.
Yeah, Ben, Mr. Chairman, phenomenal presentation, phenomenal, capital P. I noticed you indicated KCC and Olivet. Are you looking for additional partners? I think you kind of intimated that. How about Governor State as well too, which they have a substantial amount of underserved students there. Additionally, had you thought about, I know this meeting is being streamed, but you ever thought about putting it on Comcast Channel 4, the government channel? This information needs to be imparted to the masses in terms of what you're doing. And I just like to offer kudos to you guys for this. This is kind of like thinking outside the box. I mean, the potential is astronomical in terms of what may be able to transpire. We're actually growing our own locally, as opposed to affording the opportunities for people who may go to University of Chicago and stuff and coming down here to work. Same thing regarding law enforcement as well too. We need to grow our own as well too. But anyway, just want to say to you that I'm really impressed with the presentation and the actions that you're taking, what you're proposing.
Thank you.
And the way this would work is that much like any of the other job training programs, KCC or Olivet would bid out those programs, if you will. KCC does on their dislocated worker programs and all, or actually the Workforce Board bids it out, but KCC bids and it is awarded it. In Livingston County, the community college down there does. Grundy County, their community college does. So it will be open. If there is a program, then Governor State said, well, we can do this and we can bid on that as well. So it's not exclusive of those guys. We just started with at home first. So yeah, and once if we're awarded it, Workforce has to bid those things out. That's one of the reasons that the Workforce Board could no longer be housed at KCC and why the county is the fiscal agent, because they can't award themselves the bid. You know, so that's why we were brought in to be this separate party. Our finance department was to be the people basically monitoring the grant. And so that's why that exists, and even in the first place. Mr. Seroy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So November 12th, Ben, is the due date for the application for...
And a digital submission, so I don't need to fly to DC to
Okay.
drop it off or anything, so it's
And what's the turnaround usually on those types of applications?
I may have had a number for you pre-COVID.
I gotcha.
We just, a lot of the workforce, you know, at the state and federal level still is working from home. So the grant review, I can tell you if it's anything like Commerce right now, we're currently 6 months behind. I feel like we apply for a grant in, was it May or June, and we're hearing probably by March we'll have an idea of where we were. We typically would have heard back in 45 to 60 days. I mean, that's but it does make it difficult when you've got a grant packet, and our grant was 100 and something pages long, and it goes on to one reviewer, and then they have to send it back to the main office and send it to another reviewer, and it becomes cumbersome when that happens. So depending on how many people apply for this, it could be also very cumbersome.
Okay, so we're kind of hoping that by next school term,
Yeah, I think that's fair.
You know,
we would have an answer and solid direction by the start of school. And the one thing that's convenient about some of these programs, and Olivet is offered, to do really whatever we would need in order to fit into these parameters, and obviously KCC does it on a regular basis. These could be custom tailored programs. They don't have to start on the September 1st because school started.
Okay.
The program could be tied to a specific company and could be trained over, maybe it's 8 weeks or 12 weeks or 16 weeks, where they could be doing that outside of what would be a traditional.
So it's a certification, but not an actual degree type.
Well, it can be. I mean, it's
Could go either way, huh?
Yeah, the goal is not to force individuals into 2 and 4 if that's not what they necessarily need to advance, but there are components of this that could advance somebody through 2 and potentially into 4 years. We just, with a 48-month window on the grant, the first class could potentially make it through, but then the other ones would be truncated on that timeline.
And I will also add that the Kankakee Area Career Center does offer a certification program through an IT department, so that might be a line where you could encompass all the area schools. So just FYI, but I like it. I concur with everybody's thoughts and praises.
I envision it as being some, let's just say there's somebody that's a chemist now in a lab locally, or they have a chemistry degree and they're working the production line in
Right.
one of these bio firms that we have here. They want to get up to the next level. Well, they've got to get that master's degree. And then once they got that master's, and if they want to go into chemical engineering, they got to have the PhD. But guess what it's done? It's opened up 2 other spots underneath them for people that may have a 2-year degree. They want to get that chemical degree to get their foot in the door so they can get the master's. You see where I'm going with that?
Yeah.
That's the whole goal here, is to grow our own workforce to take those jobs that are available here instead of having them leave town and go do them somewhere else.
True.
Thank
you.
Mr. Hess.
Thank you, Chairman. Have you kept Dr. Murphy in the loop on this?
No, not yet. Not yet. With the once we applied, and then we would be able to say, okay, well, this is out there. We thought we'd let you know as a board, because it was, well, you don't know. Normally we just do these things, and if it happens, then we bring it to you. In this case, the message was good enough to demonstrate that. Career Center is another opportunity as well. So there could be things that go on at the Career Center, that we have, and they will be brought in once we know what it is, So, sound good? All right. This is the kind of stuff he does. He just doesn't float around, coffee shops in the area.
I do visit coffee.
All right. Moving on. Information services. Kevin, do you have anything for us today?
Can you hear me clearly?
Kevin?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm just messing with you. We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll keep it quick. I have 3 quick topics. Just to update you, we have just begun the process of updating the servers for the court system. Their current servers are around 10 years old, and they were never intended to be in service this long. I've actually placed the orders yesterday for these servers at the direction of the circuit clerk and the chief judge. So we will begin that process. It'll take several weeks, hopefully not months, but weeks to complete the process. and their computer funds pay for the purchases, not the general fund. As far as in this building, for 189 East Court Street, I plan on utilizing the COVID grant funding that the chairman has discussed with the department heads and I believe board members that was available. After discussing the process with the finance director, I've decided that I'm going to upgrade the infrastructure to allow specifically for the case if we're ever shut down again by a pandemic, it allow for us to have an increased capacity for people to work at home. We were able to do it before, but we were on the edge because it was never meant to have that many people go home. We'll have an increased capacity. To do that, I have to switch out. I have to replace switches or upgrade switches and firewalls, provide a few additional laptops to make them available through the departments that can do that, with the goal to make sure that the county during a pandemic could at least provide the basic functions that the public requires of us. And then lastly, on our budget, we're on budget, but as the finance director explained to me, to take advantage of the grant funding, they must specifically be related to COVID hardships. That's a generic term I'm using, and specifically not be part of your normal operational costs. So basically not in your budget. So I will, for a short period of time, go over my budget, but immediately it will be refunded by the grant funds. That's how they explained to me we have to do that. So we're on budget, but for, I don't know, a few days or weeks, whatever, will be over budget, but that money will come specifically for that grant funds that are already there and available. I don't know if you have any more questions or anything about that process.
Does everybody get what we're doing? This started with a conversation Mr. Hess and I had with the courts about getting minutes entered, orders entered in. If the courthouse is closed down, we still have to close down in general. We still have to keep things moving. Because you can't have people that have had warrants quashed get picked up because it hasn't been entered in the system yet because there's nobody at the courthouse to do it. So the thought was this is a real situation, especially now. If you saw the press release, we have a COVID case in the circuit clerk's office that came out last night. So if that becomes worse, then we have to make sure that we have that ability to be able to do work remotely while people are on quarantine. If they're not positive. If they're positive, then they're dealing with their health. So those laptops, as I said to Kevin, I would like them to be central. So if other departments need to have access to them, then, and I don't know if you're ready to speak to that aspect yet, not Kevin, we haven't talked about it, but to have a bank of them, if you will. So purchase like 8, 10, whatever, and have them sitting there. And then if we need 6 over there, here, and we need 4 over here, and then that rotates because this office has come back and then we need them over here. That seemed like the best use of funds because, again, they can't just be for, well, it's nice to have. There has to be a real reason, and now we have that real reason. We're starting to see some of these smaller, I don't want to say outbreak, but, incidences of COVID within different departments. Let me first make sure. Kevin, are we on the same page still?
Exactly.
Okay.
I'm kind of taking your lead of when we had the meetings where you wanted to go, so I developed something.
Okay.
Based on what you said, and talked to Steve, and he told me how the funding would work.
Okay. Mr. Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, at this time, especially we get into flu season and we're running the risk of potential shutdowns in government buildings along with other businesses, and with the warrant issue, I think it's really important we're able to continue the work even if it's outside the building, since we've had instances throughout the last 8-9 months where we've had people picked up that shouldn't have been, and that's a concerning problem. I mean, that's a problem that shouldn't be happening.
I agree.
Would you repeat that again?
We've had people picked up that shouldn't have been picked up, that warrants were quashed but weren't in the system, and people have been picked up.
Anything else, Kevin?
No, that'll be it.
Any questions for Kevin?
Super Bowl Sunday.
All right. Hey, appreciate all your work on this.
No problem.
It's a 2-man crew, and one of them's actually behind the door in there, door number 1. So they get a lot done with very few people. So I'm sure he'll be asking for more people next year. 2022. Did I tell you we just approved the budget, Kevin? Sorry. So, moving on. John Beavis from the Health Department. He is here live in person today. Oh, that's way too long of a list.
It's just packet 1 of 4. Good morning, everybody. The first thing I'd like to report on is some of what is going on behind the scenes of just the COVID-19 pandemic and the contact tracing, obviously, that we're all aware. That's basically our primary focus, but then there's a lot of other things that we're doing underneath the water, so to speak, in regards to things that the state is planning for, a mass vaccination plan, for example, when the vaccine is available. We're working on that. But approximately 2 weeks ago, out of the blue, we were notified pretty much in a webinar that the federal government and the state of Illinois are providing what's called, and I think this is a specific brand name, there's probably others, but the federal government has given to, or through a grant, I think, for Illinois, rapid test kits. And so there are many hundreds of thousands of these kits that are going to be made available, basically to be farmed out to local health departments throughout the state based on population sizes. We just received our first shipment, and then the plan is, or the intent of this whole grant and these test kits is that these rapid test kits that get farmed out from the health department, we do not have the resources or the people to do the testing ourselves. Obviously, we're going to be focusing on the contact tracing. We do have the state continuing to come into our parking lot. We're hosting their testing of COVID-19 there. These kits are designed to go into facilities like ONU, KCC, the jail, in some cases long-term care facilities. Other state-run long-term care facilities will already be receiving these through their mechanism and not have to come from us. So the original shipments that we get, we will farm out. We have to create memorandums of agreement with these facilities. They have to have a qualified individual or individuals on site that can administer these tests. Again, they're rapid kits, rapid test kits. So ultimately, it's a nasal swab. Cliff Notes version is you would go through the test procedure, and within 15 minutes you have a result, and they're designed specifically for individuals that are symptomatic. Accuracy. Well, we don't know exactly yet. They're supposed to be better than the ones previously out there, but we don't know exactly yet. We get them, we still have to farm them out. Now the plan is, or at least what we're being told, is that if Mr. Hunter, for example, takes this test and his is positive, it's a positive. Just using you as an example, please. I'll use myself then as an example. If I'm positive, then that counts towards the positives. If it's negative and I'm asymptomatic, then I believe that that's going to be counted as a negative. We're getting some clarification on that. If I'm negative but I have symptoms, which is maybe one of the reasons why I went down and get this rapid test anyway, then it's still going to require, that you then to follow up with the PRC test, the more thorough, accurate test. So in some cases there will still be additional testing that may be required, but the design and plan is, for example, in a high school setting or any school setting where you have a number of students, and here's the little student who's got sniffles or sneezes or coughs, and someone says you need to go down to the office and get tested. If these test kits are available and there's someone on site who can do the test, they can do this, and if it comes up positive, they can already begin to then on site, before the health department has even been notified, or it goes into the Illinois system as a positive case, that school or agency can begin to make the necessary arrangements of figuring out, who were you working with, who's a close contact. We need to start to separate some of these people, and then some of that work might already be in play by the time the health department's contact tracers then get a hold of that. So we have been working with our team, Alicia and Kayla and a number of individuals when we've been meeting weekly. We've got the paperwork in play. We're going to reach out. We've already communicated with the first agencies, and then we're going to think of some other ones that come into play on the backside of this, because they're going to send out so many test kits, then we're going to farm them out, and then when they use them up, we just call and get another supply and another supply and another supply. So they're assuring us that there's going to be enough test kits. Now, we don't know how many we'll get exactly, but at least through the end of this year, they will continue to supply them. If we run out, if we order, so the first shipment, for example, we got was approximately 117,000 kits, individual kits. So, between the 4 places that we're thinking of, we very easily can probably get those out. They want them, they're ready for them. They just have to set up the mechanisms to be ready to go. And then there's some reporting requirements that are in here. So if I hand them out, for example, to the county, if they had individuals that could do this and they wanted to do it, we could potentially do that. And then there's reporting requirements that you would have to do, who you administered it to, and putting that into the system, because we're not going to be doing that for you. That's part of the setup and the deal. And then obviously at some point the health department staff is going into the electronic system, and then we see that the county board, for example, had inputted these test kit results, and here's your positives or your negatives or whatever, and we proceed with them there. So that's one of the things that we're working on feverishly here in the next couple of weeks. Again, we've got our paperwork all ready to go. We're going to send those out, and then once we have the signed agreements, we'll start to get those out. Obviously, with the increase in the numbers that we're seeing statewide, countrywide, worldwide, a big part of that is the additional testing that's available now, and this is adding to that. These test kits are going to definitely add to that. There are a lot of concerns that it's going to add to the positivity rate, obviously, within a particular community or a region, such as what we may be experiencing now. I have no control over that, though. So they are going to be giving us these kits. We have to get them out to the individuals that want them. It's an opportunity to increase the testing within our community, which can help. Obviously, the more tests that get done, the more negatives that we can show. It lowers the positivity rate, which helps get us unmitigated, which, that's what we're ultimately looking for, in addition to seeing the virus, slowly phase its way out of here.
Mr. Byrd?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, a couple questions. In regards to the rapid tests, what product line are they using? Because I know in the past, as nice as the rapid tests are, the false positives and the accuracy, as Mr. Hunter said, is important when we get to the mitigation part of it. Are we going to see a spike in positives based on false positives? I mean, how does that work out? I mean, I'm just looking as a layman, looking at it, okay, we're going to see an increase in tests. How accurate are these tests? And could it have a negative effect on our numbers when, in fact, maybe they're not as accurate as we'd all like them to be?
I don't have a good answer for you, Mr. Byrne, right now. I've not seen the literature on these test kits yet as to what they say for the product. This is our false positive rate or the false negative rate. The name of the test kit is a Binax Now, BINAX Now test kit. So that's the supplier that the state is using based on what the federal government's providing to them. Now, through the webinars that we've watched and listened to and been a part of, they have indicated, and they being the state, that these are tighter than the previous ones. Now, what exactly does that mean, and what is the percentage improvement? I can't say right now.
Yeah, because I know a lot of health systems and a lot of providers have had issues with the Quest, for example, were having a lot of false positives due to the way they were batching the test in the lab itself. So there's some concern. I mean, especially right now, we're looking at numbers that are teetering on with the mitigation and the effect it has on the local,
And
local economy and local, population.
I understand, and those were definitely questions that a lot of the health departments expressed when this was brought up, that potentially if I'm testing positive, for example, with this rapid test, and it's, whether the false positive, negative, or whatever, ultimately that might require me to go get another test anyway. And again, another than thorough positive test is just 2 tests that gets added to our numbers for the county, which just, again, we knew when they started pushing out additional testing, the positivity rate was going to go up. We just knew that statewide, and that could explain why we're seeing some of what we're seeing even, over Illinois right now.
Mr. Sierra, you had something?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Beavis. Are there any costs for these tests that you're going to be dealing out to locals?
That is a great question. No, they are to be free.
Okay.
So we are getting them, the federal government's providing them to Illinois. Now, whether there was some sort of a grant or whatever that provided that, Illinois is providing them to the health departments free of charge. We will be distributing those and then only going through the paperwork process of what you have to, be able to comply with to be able to get them, because we're sort of vouching for you then and your agency to do that. And then until they run out. So these are free test kits.
So you got like 100 and some thousand, and you're going to keep track of all those positive and negatives. Okay, and so explain to me the rapid test process, because I'm not a scientist, nor have I ever worked in a hospital or stayed at a Holiday Inn Express. But are they going to need any lab work, or are there like a pregnancy test that you can do at home? Or
the example that they have expressed on a number of occasions is very similar to the pregnancy test type result situation. So you're going to come in, you're going to sit down, we're going to do a little nasal swab. Apparently it goes into some sort of a little device, and 15 minutes later it's blue, it's positive, it's pink, it's negative, kind of a
so
thing.
There could be
and that's it.
Okay, so there could be a possibility that somebody has a positive test, and then they do the Nick Saban. They take a test the next day, and then they take a test the next day, and then they take a test the next day, and they coach on Saturday. So that's if they're free, it's not really a cost, and you can verify a positive test compared to a negative test. Okay.
But you also have to realize, now I don't understand the circumstances behind that example. For example, the football coach that you're using, but theoretically, if you've tested positive and you're in isolation and or quarantine, you are to be in that isolation or quarantine for the set number of days. If you were positive here and then you test negative in 2 days, but you still had 5 days to go, that's not your get out of jail free card. Now, a number of individuals, agencies, and companies are doing that, and it's wrong, because then that's putting people that are potentially still transmissible out back into the public, so that even though they're negative.
But what if it was a false positive?
I don't know that the tests tell you that the result is this is positive, but it's a false positive kind of a thing. It's just positive or negative, and we have to go with those results.
That would be why you would retest, in my mind. I mean, like I said, I'm no scientist, but if you think you weren't positive and then you have no symptoms, have never had any symptoms, but then you test again the next day, maybe you weren't positive. That's, just because it's a positive doesn't mean it's accurate.
I believe that this is designed to try to help these situations where you have the county, the courthouse, for example, a school, an assembly line, where you have somebody who then tests positive and you can take some precautions, as opposed to 4 days later you find out you have to close the plant.
No, and I agree with you 100%. I'm just saying, with the amount of false positives that have been reported, being able to test more would kind of thin that part out.
Right.
I'm wondering if we're talking past each other a little bit. I think Nick Saban had and others like in that situation, they had a rapid test that was a positive. They had the full test at 3 days in a row, and those are all negative. So I think that's what is being
Okay,
missed here.
I got you.
The initial event was a
Yes.
rapid test, and to my, and Mr. Lear was next. My point is that it is disappointing to find that a rapid test will be counted as a positive until it's unverified by the real test, if you will. Our numbers can't hold that right now, because right now it's already supporting employers retesting everybody daily until they can go back to work. And that is skewing our numbers even more.
That is it, yes.
It's a severe problem in our numbers because we see what's from the 2 hospitals. We don't see what these employers are sending to third-party labs. We do on the back end, we could extrapolate that once the state releases their numbers 3 to 7 days later. We can kind of say, okay, well, these must have come through third parties, but we do know that if, you know, because you're paying them to stay home, and if you had a positive at work and then all of a sudden 2 weeks later they start testing almost every day or every other day, each one of those is a positive. So you can rack up 20, 30 positives in the matter of a month with one individual. That's a problem. And the employers are doing their community a disservice by doing that. And I understand why, because you don't want to pay people to stay home. I get it, I understand, but then it actually has a ripple effect throughout the whole community. And in this case, it's killing the bar and the restaurant business. So Mr. Lear first, and then Mr. Byrne, I think you had a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm excited to hear about this program because I think it's a real step forward. I do realize that the public should understand that even though there's no financial cost in terms of the county, it does mean either the agencies or the county is going to be doing a lot of paperwork, and there is a cost involved there.
And you guys are using your grant money to cover the cost.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I appreciate that statement. You know, that is the role of the health department, to investigate any kind of an outbreak or pandemic that's going on. We just happen to be living through the COVID-19 right now. You know, as Mr. Wheeler said, we've gotten 2 grants that are helping, you know, obviously now facilitate some additional hires to take that pressure of work off so that we can have our staff trying to do at least what our normal grant duties and deliverables would be in this COVID time. We just don't seem to catch a break, and I'm not asking anybody to feel sorry for us. It's just every time we think we're going to catch our breath, you know, here comes these new tests we want you to push out to everybody, and oh, by the way, you know, the vaccine might come out next month and you need to be ready for that, and all the testing that we're going to have to do. So we're scrambling underneath, but we are here to serve you, the public, and everybody. But I definitely wanted to make this information available so that if you start to hear about it all of a sudden that this school has this or they're doing that, and then you're like, well, wait a minute, where did that come from? I didn't want to be derelict in my trying to get some of that information out to you. And then obviously, as we start to see some information, I can report back to you.
Anything else on this, Mr. Byrne?
Real quick, if personally, I work in the lab world, if I were to have a positive test with a rapid test, and I was unsure of the resulting, I would suggest going to your physician and getting a PCR test. That molecular testing is a lot more accurate. It's right on the money. That's just my own 2 cents of advice. But doing the continual rapid test, the rapid tests have been proven to have a lot of false positives. So I'd be real leery of that. Just my own 2 cents.
And I'll just add that, you know, typically in our medical world, pre-COVID, I mean, basically that if you went to the doctor and they said, you've got this and we recommend you have surgery, we were always typically getting a second opinion at that point before you went and, you know, did something maybe unnecessarily. So I completely agree with that. And I think that that's what a lot of people have done. Maybe they're in denial or don't believe this first result, or if it was a rapid test, then that's kind of what this rapid test was really designed to do. It's just kind of give you a fast result, may not be completely accurate, but at least it sets you in motion to be worried about something. And then the school or the business can already be taking care of who was working around Jim at the time when that happened, versus 5 days later, we're trying to remember who was Jim working around when he was sick.
Yeah, we hear about false positive. What about false negative? Mr. Hunter.
Yeah, just you know, as a kid, you know, my dad was a microbiologist, and if he were alive, I'm sure he'd like to be a part of this conversation. But I'm really amazed that some of the questions have been posed and some of the responses that have been provided. So I think this is good information for our respective citizens in the county. And I really appreciate this being brought forth to impart information to our citizens.
Do you have anything else?
I do. I'm sorry. I do. A lot of this is just catching up. I know earlier there was the question of the situation at the courthouse, or even all over, some of the schools in the area. Earlier this week, the state changed the definition of what an outbreak was. Prior to a couple of days ago, it was any two people in any one situation. So that could be a restaurant, it could be a bar, it could be a business, it could be in here, it could be a family function, a party, a restaurant, whatever. Any two people then that tested would be considered an outbreak. They've raised that to 5. Makes it a little bit easier, especially in school settings, for example, when maybe you have 2 or 3 kids on a football team, for example, that are maybe testing positive, and 2 are on the offensive side and one's on the defensive side, or one's a coach and this one's a student. It sort of makes that a little bit easier. We're still going to be doing the work underneath for any positive and or close contact. It doesn't change that, but it changes the definition and gives a little bit more flexibility to not necessarily call that an outbreak and create more work. Because any outbreak then is recorded and treated, as its own animal within the state system too. That isn't something that you see. So hopefully that's going to be something that's going to help. We pushed out some information earlier this week. We're going to continue to do that in regards to the contact tracing that the health department does, and this is statewide, not just for Kankakee County. So I'm glad you're here. The phone number that would come across, if any one of you received a phone call that you were potentially either positive or maybe a close contact and someone was reaching out to you, it's not going to be the typical 815 that you would expect. And in this age of the election year and all the calls that we're getting from anybody and everybody anyway, and we're just dismissing it, the contact tracing call is a 312 area code. It just is. We can't do anything about that. Statewide, it's the same number. It's 312-777-1999. It's like the Prince song. So if you see that number, and it should come across as COVID contact tracing, but we're going to try to get the word out to the public that basically if you see this, please answer it. These are your county contact tracers trying to reach out to you. The other thing that's going to happen on Friday, the 30th, is the state with its Salesforce, that's the name of this new computer program that they gave to the contact tracers right after they gave us the money to hire these contact tracers and said, okay, here's what you have to do and a new computer program to boot. They're going to release some metrics on Friday for the state to see what kind of work is being done by each county in regards to the contact tracing calls that they're making. We have no idea what kind of numbers they're going to throw out there, and all I can say is that this can be good or it can be bad. Now, two of the things that traditionally they're going to try to say is like, we are required through the grant to do at least 90% of individuals when they're positive within 24 hours. We have to reach out to you within 24 hours, at least 90% of all the cases. Okay. So you're going to see that percentage. Now, as of a couple of weeks ago, Kankakee County was at 91%. That was great. That was before our surge. Now, that being said, there's going to be a secondary number behind that, and it's going to look awful. It's going to be follow-up. And as of a few weeks ago, our percentage was somewhere in the 30%, let's say 35%, for example. People might look at that and say, well, that's terrible. What's that health department doing? They're not calling anybody back. No, I'm reaching out to Mr. Siroy, for example, to let him know he's a positive case, and he never calls me back. We reach out 3 times, 4 times. He's an abandoned call. We can't get a hold of him. That is the follow-up number. So we have 35% of the individuals who are attempting to work with us. The rest, for whatever reasons, lost numbers, wrong numbers, denial, don't want us to know, or just trying to avoid it, that's going to be some of that information. So again, they've not shown us what those numbers are going to be. The governor and the state in their infinite wisdom have just decided that this is transparency, but I just wanted you to know that now we're going to have county metrics that are a week old, regional metrics that are 3 days old, and Salesforce metrics, and they're all three different.
And you said they're releasing it, but to themselves.
No, I think it's supposed to be made public, that the public can see it, but we don't even know on what mechanism it's going to be available.
Mr. Chair?
Let me go with the Zoom first. Mr. Featherling?
Yeah. Mr. Rivas, thank you for your time. Thank you, Andy. If a lot of these companies that are going, like if I get tested positive, example, and I'm not that bad, but I still can't go back to work till I pass a positive test. And Andy just talked about this a minute ago. Are you notifying these employers that this is really skewing our numbers and that it's hard on our economy if they keep doing this? Are you sending letters out to the big employers going, hey, you know, every time you do a positive test, it counts as a positive test. It's not a different case. It's another case.
It's
I don't understand why we shouldn't, if you got grant money available for clerical help, that we shouldn't be sending letters out to these companies telling them that this is skewing our number and that they should wait a standard 14 days like you would tell me if I tested positive and stay home for 14 days.
That information is being made available through, you know, we are contacting the individual. Obviously, for HIPAA reasons, we have to contact a specific individual, but we can also, through this pandemic, we have the right to then contact, you know, principals, presidents, CEOs, HR people, to maybe not necessarily tell them who specifically, but they may have an outbreak or individuals within their facility, and they are given that information that they need to do. But I am coming across even individuals that I know personally who don't like that, and they're just changing it and or having people test negative and then saying you can come back to work. We can't control that. There's just too many of that going on out there with the individuals that we have. We have to hope that they're doing it on good faith.
Well, if we have rules to our economy for our county, shouldn't everybody have to follow rules to try to help guidelines go down so we can keep rolling here?
That's a great statement, and in a real world or an ideal world, we could do that. I would just throw one example out there that we're not supposed to do indoor dining right now.
Yeah. Right. That's true. Okay. But anyway, John, I hope you have the...
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be... I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be facetious there, but I was just making a point.
Yeah, it goes around, comes around.
Yeah. Mr. Byrne.
Yeah, well, if you need any help, I know a lot of out-of-work people that might be willing to help you, John. In regards to numbers, there's people behind numbers. DuPage County is the one county out of 102 that seem to have the data pretty clear in regards to like bars and restaurants, for example, which show 6% since March. Are we accumulating that data here in Kankakee County? I mean, I know the state's producing data, but they got to get that data somewhere. Obviously, we must be collecting it here. Are we looking at it, scrutinizing these numbers, this data, the science we're told to believe, but yet impacts people that may not be the spreaders? I mean, I was at a meeting on Thursday with restaurant and bar owners. I asked the question, who here in this room can tell me your employees, mass employees, have had outbreaks? No one. Everyone said, no, we've had maybe a case here and there. They're putting out numbers. And you see numbers of long-term care facilities, state-run facilities, especially in this area that had an outbreak, they weren't being shut down. But yet you have certain target audiences that are being shut down. Again, I think the data, as much as we like to hear and see it, there are impacts on people behind it. And I think it's our role as government, if we're gonna impede people, we'd better have accurate numbers. And can't wait for Friday, but if there's a way we can generate a report here in Kankakee County, similar to what DuPage County has done, I think that would be beneficial for everybody.
So again, great question, Mr. Byrne, and thank you for that. That is another thing that I had here just to add is that through the contact tracing grant, we have finally been able to hire a data analysis analyst who we have him hooked up into the Salesforce system now, and he is beginning to research our numbers now going back about 2 months is since Salesforce started, that's really as far back as we can go in regards to, you know, our trying to tell our story for Kankakee County now. So yes, that mechanism is now in place, but we're obviously taking baby steps. What and how and why DuPage was able to do that? They've obviously a longer health department history than what we have. They have more money than we have probably. You know, 8 months ago, we didn't need this kind of a person. We didn't need this kind of information. So it's become apparent that through the processes that we are at today, that this is a big question. So that individual is in place. We're hoping as soon as we have information, I've talked with Andy about this, as soon as we have information from what he's able to decipher to see if he can tell us some of those kinds of things. I think we'll be able to see the different things of, you know, understand that when an individual is being interviewed, when they're positive, they're being asked for approximately 3 to 4 days prior to their onset of symptoms, everything they've done. Where did you eat? Where did you go? Who were you around? What are you doing? That kind of information. Some of it's hard to remember if we're calling you 3, 4, 5 days after the fact. If we're calling you right away, your memory's a lot better. There was a study that came out recently that the governor even quoted that said most of the reason that he's going this avenue is that most of the individuals who tested positive for coronavirus within 2 weeks of testing positive have all eaten out. I mean, that's everybody. If you think about it, who doesn't go through a drive-through at least once a day? You know, so that doesn't seem to be empirical enough data for me to be able to say that. But to answer your question, we have an individual in place. He's beginning to look at the numbers, and when we have more concrete data, we'll share that.
Thank you.
Those types of statements are almost like saying that, you know, 99% of the people's death is associated with them being alive in the first place. I mean, it's completely ridiculous. I'm sorry that I can't to leave out big box stores, to leave out gas stations, to leave out wherever we all go all the time is cherry picking. I think that was a study that was done by economists from Germany. And it wasn't put through an IRB with no p-value. No, there was no statistical significance drawn on anything. I mean, an economist doing a health study from Germany over states all across the United States that are different and had different policies. I'm sorry, that you had me in, not you, the other guy had me in me law.
The other JB.
That situation is ridiculous. Of course, we've all come in contact with a lot of different people. And to leave big box out of it is nuts. So,
I only had one more thing. If there's not any more questions. This is
motion to adjourn? No, I'm just kidding.
I wanted to follow up on, you know, a couple of months ago, obviously, when we were dealing with the first mitigation, now we're dealing with the second mitigation, the administrative rules process that was described with the complaint process that the health department can do. The Board of Health met last month and developed a policy on how to proceed with those. I had Keith run me the numbers. So since that's gotten into place, we've had 33 COVID complaints on, and not just bars and restaurants, that will include agencies and businesses, but bars, restaurants, and agencies, and we've had 33 complaints that we have investigated. Only 3, which is 9%, required us to have to send that first letter. Everyone else was doing reasonable efforts. So that shows, and again, I take offense a little bit sometimes to what gets said in press conferences, that on one day we're doing all that we can, we're wearing our masks and doing a good job, and then the next day we're being scolded for not wearing our masks and doing a bad job, when everywhere I go I see people doing the best that they can. So if 9 out of 10 people in Kankakee County are wearing their masks, watching their distances, washing their hands, avoiding social gatherings, I don't see how we can ask for any more. Perfect world would be 10, but this is not a perfect world. So I applaud Kankakee County. I applaud you for your support, the businesses that are out there doing the best that they can. And I think these complaints kind of demonstrate that we are going out and investigating them, and we're seeing most of them are doing reasonable efforts to maintain what we're asking them to do. And he's preaching that that's what we need to do, and we are. I just want to make sure that that's known. I appreciate it.
Anything else for John?
Just good job, John. Keep up the good work. You know, I know it's tough for you.
I can shorten this next month by not coming. How's that? Thank you.
We have nothing for Dr. Murphy. The VAC report was already approved. Staffing report from Anita Speckman, County Administrator.
Good morning. You have the staffing report in front of you. You can see in terms of current month activity, we are a net +5. Those are really, there were 3 corrections officers, 2 part-time medical staff, and the way it works out there is there's a lot of nurses that work part-time out there. So even though there was 1 resignation and 2 addition, it's not really a head count addition. The hours are the hours that the part-time staff work, so it means that they still have the same number of hours worked by part-time staff, so it's not a head count addition. Let me see, the VAC position is a temporary position they added, anticipated at about 6 months. Circuit clerk is normal turnover in that department. I think that's it. Any other questions about the staffing report? You remember the increase year over year. There are 7 AmeriCorps grant-funded employees in the state's attorney headcount, even though there's not really salary dollars related to that. That grant isn't functioning as strongly as it used to, and it's also grant funded. 6 increase, that's in CANCOM, that's the Bradley Group. 4 in probation, that's covered by the state reimbursement grant. And the maintenance position, 1 maintenance position is budgeted. That was a budget increase for 2020. There's also 3 part-time people or seasonal people that are on the head count. 1 in administration, that's the door steward that works in the morning. 2 in maintenance that are being utilized for courthouse cleaning during COVID. Those are all grant reimbursed under COVID.
Any questions there? Zoom? Anything else? For us?
Question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, do you have a breakout in terms of, am I missing this, in terms of race and sex?
It's not in this report.
Was it EO4 or whatever you got?
Well, as I mentioned 2 months ago when we discussed the EEO4 job classifications are not available in Paylocity. It's all set up for EEO1. Do I know how many female versus males we have in employee? 58% male, 42% female within the county. By race in total, yes, I have those numbers. They are pretty close to what the race numbers are within Kankakee County. As we mentioned,
15%?
2 months ago, for black, you're asking? We're at 10% for black, so we're 5% below optimum.
Yeah.
For Hispanic, 6% below 11%, which is what the county census says.
Okay.
Any other races you're questioning? I have those numbers if you'd like them.
So how might I receive those?
I can run you, actually, I have my report here. You can just have it.
Yeah, I was going to say, why can't you add that as an addendum to this?
Because it takes up a whole page.
Okay. Okay.
I can do an additional one every month if you'd like. I will tell you they're pretty consistent.
Okay.
Any other thoughts, Mr. Kinzinger? Yeah.
I like to go on record as saying that I believe that's a disservice to our employees, and that I like to consider people who are qualified that work for the county.
Okay. EAC. Any other thoughts on the staffing? All right, thank you.
The only other thing was I wanted to follow up on the highway memo of understanding we discussed last month, and this committee asked me to take back and create, I think, a better product is what I heard. We did rewrite it, Mark Rogers and Nancy Nicholson and I. We sent it back. It had been approved by the State's Attorney's Office and the union, so I shortened it, which is what this committee requested. We sent it back to the state's attorney. We worked with them on it, so they've approved it. We sent it back to the union. We just got their response back Monday that they approved it, so I'll bring it back here next month. And other than that, I'm working with Kelly on open enrollment, getting ready for that.
Are we under any time issues by bringing it back at the end of November and then have to vote on it in December? Is there anything, because we're in a new contract year?
Can you bring it straight to the
Can we
board?
bring it straight to full board?
Well, the memo of understanding for the highway contract, that union contract goes another 2 years.
So it's not really
So-
gonna
and
cause us
it's-
any problem. We can
Right,
come
and
back
it's
to this
not
committee.
changing benefits that are already, it's clarifying a discrepancy between two different parts of that contract. That's what we discussed last month.
Okay.
So
Take it
right
away.
now, we haven't had a grievance. That's what we were trying to do with that memo of understanding, was avoid a grievance. And we haven't had one yet. We've been able to work with our employees, so we're just trying to clarify that.
It's an MOU then, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, executive and then full board December.
Yeah.
Yep, okay.
Okay?
Mr. Featherling, did you have something?
Yeah, Mr. Beckman, I'd like to back up Mr. Kinzinger's comment about hiring the most qualified people and not having to tally what particular genders or races that they are. We really need to hire qualified people for our positions, and doing a really good job at that. So there should be no criticizing of your numbers if you have them now, Bill.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Chairman, if I might, it's not an issue of not selecting the most qualified people. Anita indicated there's certain requirements that are mandated. I'm merely asking for information. I'm not pointing a accusing finger at anybody at this point. You got to understand that. So, you know, I'm a pragmatist. You know, I've had numerous years of public service in the human resource and investigation process. So don't misconstrue the rationale for my question. Just asking you for just empirical information. And this is America, not with a K, but with a C. And I thank Anita for providing that information. I'll have further conversations with her regarding the stats which she has provided. But I'm just saying to you guys, that stuff is required.
So when we, Mr. Hunter is absolutely correct. We are required, I believe, on a yearly basis to report those numbers. Or is it every other year? It's
every 2 years.
every 2 years we're required to, and that matches up with our affirmative action resolution and everything else. So we do make that report available every other year. And are we on that schedule for it to be done this year?
No, it'll be next year.
It'll be next year, but we definitely want to at least get that information to you if you need it, so it can be run. So yeah, it's not a hiring quota, it's more of an informational where we're at, knowing that administration only controls the hiring for administration, this office. The other department heads control hiring for their own particular offices as well. All right, moving on. Administrative, we're removing the appointment for Clausen Park Drainage District from the agenda at the request of the applicant and the Drainage District's attorney. They're bringing something back. They've got to tweak something. I have the appointment of Andy Wegner to the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee. That is the vet position. She wanted to stay, but the vet has to be renewed on a more frequent schedule than the rest of the AWAC committee members. So is there a motion to approve that? Mr. Byrne, Mr. Hunter, is there any questions about this? It's more. Okay, do roll call on Zoom, please.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton, Ms. Haas,
Aye.
Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye. All those in the room, same sign?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under openings, 3 openings under the Mantino number 9 drainage, 1 opening under the Moments and Yellowhead drainage number 1, 3 on the Moments Pembroke Union drainage number 1, 1 on the Raymond Drainage District, 1 on Spring Creek drainage, 1 on Union Drainage District number 2, 1 on the Yellowhead and Washington Union Drainage District number 2, 12 openings on the Kankakee County Regional Planning Commission, 1 opening on the Essex Township Fire Protection District, and 1 opening on the Kankakee Township Fire Protection District. Is there any new business out there from the group? Under old business, we have the, yesterday we opened up a request for proposal. This committee, I believe, saw the communication and the recommendation from the Planning Department. Do we all see that? And so the authorization of the county board chairman to sign an agreement for a countywide e-waste service provider. Is there a motion first on that? Mr. Lear and Mr. Hess with a second. Discussion.
The only discussion I'd have, did Ben go through all of this?
Did Ben go through it? Del,
I was
yes.
just joking.
Yeah.
That come from yesterday.
Oh, okay, the abuse will continue, okay. Alrighty, and this is the start of the process. Again, there's a lot of intergovernmental agreements that have to happen with all these municipal governments and karma in the event that this works out. So that's gonna be happening really quick over the next month and a half. It seems like we've got something here. And once we get the final look at what it is, we'll bring back the IGA here to this committee first. So on Zoom, unless there's any other questions, roll call on Zoom, please.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton,
Aye.
Ms. Haas,
Aye.
Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Sorry.
Is that an aye? Awkward. Mr. Miller, sorry.
Aye.
Wow. In the roll call in the room too, please. I'm sorry, I forgot. We're
Lear?
spending money.
Mr. Hess,
Aye.
Mr. Byrne,
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger, Mr. Hunter, Mr. Seroy, Mr. Wheeler,
Aye.
motion carries.
All right, last thing, under other business, I have something unless somebody has something else. December 7th, looking at, that is the date of the new board being sworn in and the election of the chairman at that point and vice chairman. That's, again, December 7th. It's the first Monday by county code and statute, actually, that's when that has to happen. We've got issues with the room and the number of people that can be in the room. So went around and around, talking with Anita, talking with State's Attorney's Office, looking at what the governor's exemptions on OMA are. Really, and as I'm getting my little cheat sheet here out, I've only got room in this room for 15 board members. That's all we've got based on social distancing and taking up the whole room. And you need Dan and you need Kelly to run the meeting. And so we've got an issue as far as, you know, being able to fit all board members in the room at once. You know, they would be within, if we put everybody in the room, it would still take up the whole room basically. And we're within 6 feet of each other. And in this case, that sign back there says 75. So I'm maxed out at 19. Regardless of anything else per the governor's orders. Okay, so, and then if we go up from that, I've only got room for 21 with social distancing all in the room. So basically I have to come up with something now so we let people know what's going on. And so the only way that I see this working is that if we say that only those board members who have, which is half the board that are up for election this time, would be, say, eligible to come in to the meeting in and of itself on the 7th. The rest, and I did check with the state's attorney, you can be sworn in via Zoom. So if some of those folks are uncomfortable with being in the room with a full house, because it will still be a full house then, they can be sworn in from home. But then by seniority, we would go down and see who wants to be in the room. Also, unfortunately, there's no room for, because those seats are taken up in the back under those auspices. We left the press table open, obviously, because we wanted to make sure I could fit more people, but we'd have to kick you out, and that's not something we're going to do. I don't want to hear from the IPA, a lawyer on that one. But no, it's one of those things where we just don't have the room with 6 feet. So unless somebody else has a better idea, and we can't move this show on the road because we're talking $3,500. If there is substantial infrastructure, it would be a lot more than that we have to build to broadcast these meetings. That's why somebody had suggested, let's go somewhere else for all of our meetings. Well, you can't. We don't have that. That's a cost that we can't bear. So just to let people know that we're looking at, public comment is still going to be call in. Those 14, does anyone have a major issue with that? Because I don't know any other way around it. To be honest, I've been wrestling with this for like a month and a half. How do we do that meeting?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Featherling.
Is there any way to rotate people in and out from the hallway to the room? Like put the 14 or 10 in the hallway and 14 in the room, and then, move them in and out when it's time to go or whatever?
Unfortunately, you're still breathing the same air.
Yeah, I know.
So it is unfortunate. It's not optimal, but I don't really know how to do it. And put it like this, if we're broadcasting the meeting live anyway, there is no OMA situation. So even if I had another room in here, they'd still be just like they were sitting at home on their computer or on their phone, so yes, Mr. Kinzinger.
I just asked Mr. Lear, Mr. Hunter.
Steve.
So many Steves.
Because I figured he'd have this answer, but what am I missing? Haven't we been doing Zoom meetings with meetings? And some come and some don't?
Some come and some don't, but I have to be able to nail down because there may be some new board members. So it's a swearing in. It's somewhat of it's an election. It's a little bit different than a normal meeting. So I had to be able to come up with our own mitigation plan based on what that number is on the wall back there that can fit in this room. And so even at 50%, that's over, that's more than the capacity for the room would allow with social distancing, 6 feet. We've done the measurements. That's why these dots are on all the tables. And that's why the chairs are spread out back there. So we do have chairs in the hallway, but that's really not in the best interest either. So how do I put this? The restaurants can make up their own mind what type of risk they're going to take on. Here, I'm not willing to take on lawsuits risk by trying to cram a bunch of people in this room, because ultimately the restaurants would be paying out their own money in the bars in a fine or whatever. Here, we're paying out the taxpayers' money, and I'm not about to do that. So, Mr. Hess.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that's your decision, and I think what you need to do is just communicate with anybody that's being elected and make that decision then.
Mm-hmm.
You being chairman, that should be your decision.
Right. Well, I had to do something now rather than wait till the last minute.
Right.
Give people time to plan. And then if you are one of the 14 and you don't necessarily want to be here and someone else does, that's why I say maybe the seniority, give people the choice based on the open seats. And the new kid on the block is at the bottom of that. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't want to hear emotion.
So again, I'm trying to think fair, yet that's standing and seniority and all these other things. Like if I was a new board member, I'd want to bring family, but we just can't do that. We just can't. There's no way to do it. These are different times. So
Your decision.
yeah. So okay, just letting everybody know if anybody's got a real problem, I'm sure you're gonna call me anyway. So Is there any other motions that might be entertained at this point?
I'll make a motion
To
to
adjourn.
adjourn.
That would be Mr. Hess, and a second with Mr. Featherling. All those in favor say aye. Those
Aye.
opposed, the same sign.